Good evening. Today is Tuesday, January 24th. My name is Fred Chase. I will call to order this meeting of the Bridgewater Town Council. If you would kindly join me in a salute
Recording
to our
in
flag.
progress.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all.
Thank you. The council has not been made aware of the recent passing of any veterans in the town, but I would appreciate it if you would kindly join me in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of those who have passed before. Thank you very much. First item on our agenda this evening is the approval of minutes from the January 10th meeting of the council. Entertain a motion for approval.
Moved. Second.
I believe we'll have one abstention. Gallagher. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
None. Announcements from the president. I do just have one very brief announcement. I have filled open committee seats, which were caused by the results of the election and the departure of 3 members of the council prior to the January 7th town election. And I think that our town council clerk will be making all the councilors aware of the results of the filling of those positions within coming days, probably by the end of this week. I really gave it a very light touch. My intention was primarily to fill the vacancies on committees which were caused by the results of the election, and I generally did not change any other existing committee membership. I wanted to make you aware of that.
Question.
Yes.
Is there an opportunity to be on any of the committees at
Yes.
this point?
Yes, and I'll let you know the results of that. Debbie will circulate the results of.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Proclamations, we have none this evening. We can move right to citizen open forum. And I would invite any citizen who cares to address the council to please step forward to the podium, introduce yourself by name, and identify your street. And if you would kindly limit your remarks to no more than 3 minutes, I would appreciate it. Anyone who cares to step forward? Yes, please.
My name is Bernice Morrissey. I live, and I brought a little bit of material for everyone to have, and I'm sorry. I'm just standing here to, coming in tonight to say that I oppose the ordinance DFY 23-006 that will be talked about tonight for the zoning change. I have been living on Lake Nipponicket for 35 years, and I've seen a lot of changes down there. And so as we're building out and for economic development purposes, I appreciate if this council would consider another thing before you make a decision or before zoning gets changed for economic purposes. Years ago, we used to develop using, I need my glasses, sorry. Under a land management type of development process. So years ago, this is something that was circulated, and it talked about developing the lake area in a more natural way in consideration of the ACEC area and all the protections that have been put on place down there. So one of the very important things that I want to say is I want to talk about swamp and what it does for our community. So when you think about Hockomock Swamp, it's been referred to as an engineering marvel that didn't cost a dime to construct. And does that do a lot for us? Not just the people down on the NIP, but for the 8-10 communities that Hockomock touches. And I also brought the reading materials, just one page out of a book called Wonder Wetland, that was written by Kathleen Anderson, a biologist and ornithologist. She's quite widely known around here for all her contributions to environmental protection. So she had gotten a grant in the 50s when she was working in the Hawk, collecting birds to test for what's that disease that you get from, oh, never mind. So what I want to read, what's particularly important is the Hockomock Swamp contains approximately 6,000 acres, including the water surface of Lake Nippenicket. The Hockomock acts as a huge reservoir, which allows the water to build up to the swamp around the vegetation and then slowly flow out to the town river. And so I wanted to have the book for you. It's a little handbooklet called Wonder Wetlands. And in the back, Kathleen summarizes it all by, you think of it like a piece of pie down there with the Hockomock Swamp. If we keep chipping away at it or taking another forkful of pie out of it, it's not going to be there for any of us. And that, I have to say, is no way, like, with climate change, for us to move forward. So I hope you will consider the environmental impact of any ordinance changes that go on down there, because we're overbuilt. It's wet. And it flows north to south into the Nip, into the Town River. All that water, the streams that are on the land that's scheduled to be developed. So those things are very important to consider. I'm sorry I ran in unprepared and just get that.
Thank you very much. Other residents who care to step forward?
Good evening, councilors. Sam Baumgarten, 60 Short Street. I want to start off by thanking you all for your continued service to Bridgewater and offer a special welcome and thanks to the new folks who are stepping into the public arena. Like others who are here tonight, I'm here to comment on the Claremont proposal for further development around the NIP, with tonight's zoning change request being the opening salvo, so to speak, in getting their proposal moving. I strongly urge the council to reject this amendment, whether tonight or at a future meeting, and more generally, to reject further requests for zoning changes without a significant reduction in the size and scope of the proposed development and a more detailed response to the questions and concerns that will be raised by my fellow townspeople, especially those from the Lake Nip Action Focus team, some of whom, bless them, have read every page of the proposal. I want to address the bigger concern, which is the area of environmental concern, which is what the NIP is noted for, or noted as. And I just wanted to read briefly the definition. An area of critical environmental concern is a place in Massachusetts that receives special recognition because of the quality, uniqueness, and significance of its natural and cultural resources. The purpose of the ACE program is to preserve, restore, and enhance critical environmental resources and resource areas of the Commonwealth. The goals of the program are to identify and designate these ecological areas, to increase the level of protection, and to facilitate and support the stewardship of these areas. The overall proposal by Claremont, starting with tonight's ordinance, rather than, quote, preserving, restoring, and enhancing critical environmental resources, will, in fact, diminish and harm those resources. In my brief review of the draft environmental notice, the word mitigate appears over and over again. To me, that word is a red flag. The mere fact that mitigation is mentioned so often indicates that there will be harm. There will be harm to wetlands, wildlife, trees, and historical areas. Further, the need for numerous zoning changes and variants is basically an attack on the structures of the town that we have in place to protect the environment. We have developmental restrictions in place for good reason. We, meaning all of us human beings, are living through an era of severe environmental degradation and the consequential deleterious climate changes. The battle is forever money and profits versus the environment and saving the planet. Frankly, it's time to save this small part of the planet and demand that the big corporation find another less harmful way to improve its bottom line. The town council, along with other relevant town boards, need to take a stand and say, no more, not here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baumgarten. Other residents who would care to step forward?
Good evening. I'm Pat Neary, 225 Lakeside Drive, and welcome to our new counselors as well as our older ones, or ones that are coming back. Not that they're old, but I don't need to remind you, but I will. Since we don't have town meeting any longer, please remember that you represent the residents of Bridgewater, not your personal beliefs or your personal goals. I know you've been probably reminded of that, but I'm reminding you again. Tonight, you are going to be discussing an important change, zoning change. Current zoning for this area is Planned Development District, which was designed to achieve significant revenue or employment benefits without adverse impact on their neighborhoods or on the town's natural resources. We know that you are all trying to build our commercial tax base, which the PDD zone was designed for. So why use up that land for housing? Claremont can design a low-impact commercial project that complies with our regulations. You may say that we have a housing crisis, but we have reached and gone beyond our affordable housing percentage. We've done enough. You also know that we are experiencing a water crisis. How many bedrooms are in this 225-room over 55 complex? A one-bedroom unit is calculated to use 110 gallons per day. If these are two bedrooms, that number is almost 50,000 gallons per day that we cannot allow. It is a known fact that new large housing projects are unsustainable in our town. The initial Claremont special permit limited the use of gallons per day at 100,000 gallons. The proponent states that in their environmental report that they can't comply with many environmental regulations because it is not economically feasible. They plan to request more zoning changes, variances, and waivers to enhance their bottom line without regard for the residents or the environment. Our bylaws, or Y laws, are in place to protect the environment and the daily lives of our residents. The proponent already disregards our Wetland Protection Act by cutting trees on the shore of Lake Nipponicket within the 150-foot, 100-foot buffer without authorization. The new plans do not honor our local zoning setback or our Wetland Protection Act. There are so many concerns. Please deny this zoning change request. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri. Other residents?
My name is Kitty Doherty, 524 Conan Street. I first came onto the Bridgewater Conservation Commission when the area that is now known as Claremont was under discussion for a huge shopping mall, and shopping mall down in Taunton beat the permit from the one up here. So I've been familiar with some of the changes there for decades. The ACEC, or Area of Critical Environmental Concern, has in its documentation that there should be no more development between the shores of the Nip and Route 104. So I don't see why people knowing that that is what is in the ACEC, which is more than just the Bridgewater governance, it's a state mandate, why they would come forward thinking that that's a good spot for a restaurant. It's not a good spot. And other people have already addressed the importance of the purity or whatever we can still do to protect the Hockomock Swamp. Now, the Hockomock Swamp has shrunk because of the development all around it. There's always the back and forth conversation about which way the water flows, et cetera, et cetera. But no matter how you look at it, that lake is there and it collects the runoff that comes from on and around. And it goes into the swamp and out through the town river. The town river is about 14 river miles long. It's protected at its headwaters right there by the ACEC, and its outflow when it conjoins with the Matfield River and becomes the Wild and Scenic Taunton River. So that's precious to our particular town in how we promote our part of the town river and the other communities in upstream on the town river. As far as the development itself between Route 104, 495, and 24, I don't see how the proposed additional dwellings and buildings and structures can fit in there and still allow the towns for that area to not be a city. It's, you know, to have all of that new construction and all of those new homes. I think that it's good if Bridgewater could have an assisted living place someplace, and also to have a restaurant on that side of town, but not on that side of 104. And as far as the assisted living is concerned, maybe that could be a component of what the people from Claremont still do, but we don't need to have another housing unit there and another village with more residents, because I think that we're at capacity for what we can absorb as a community. I think my 3 minutes are up too, and I'm only half started. But you guys are blessed because I'll go sit down. Anyway, I urge you to vote no on this. And perhaps another thing too, yeah, we all get paid overtime for this because it's after my 3 minutes, but haven't the management of Claremont come in with an awful lot of zoning requests over and over and over again? It's like they're beating us down. And does anyone here ever have a horse? You ever know what you put a twitch on their nose? And that's to distract them. I think that maybe this restaurant on that side of the lake would be a distraction so that they could have everything they asked for on the other side of it. And because it's dumb to put a restaurant right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Doherty.
Good evening. My name is Vernon Domingo, 1136 Saddle Drive, right there in the NIP area. And I'm here to urge the council not to approve zoning regulations that will allow despoilation of the NIP area. The area around the NIP is a special area. It's a gem for Bridgewater. It should be regarded as such. I live real close to it there. I remember many nights watching people come to that area, sit at the lake, look at the setting sun. It's a gorgeous area. We need to preserve that. My image there of young couples very often coming and proposing marriage right there at the NIP will always stay by me. And so it's a magical spot. We need to make sure that that remains unchanged. And so my message is, I urge the council not to approve any zoning changes that will allow that to be despoiled, increasing traffic, increasing pollution, both water and physical pollution. It will change the character of our town, and in particular, the character of the NIP. I urge you not to approve zoning changes that will do that. Thank you.
Mr. Domingo. There are citizens who would like to step forward.
Hello, everyone. I don't usually bear with me. I'm relatively new to Bridgewater, 260 Lakeside Drive, right on Lake Connecticut. And my concerns about this proposed Claremont project is its impact on the environment, including wildlife, local communities, nearby towns, nearby neighborhoods, such as my own, and the public's enjoyment of peaceful recreation on Lake Nipnic. As a number of people have already said, existing zoning doesn't support this objective. The other thing that I'm really truly concerned about is looking at the 55 plus zoning in isolation doesn't allow everyone to really see what is planned here, and what is planned is a scale of development which I think the local area cannot support. It will create extreme overcrowding, and I don't believe that we have the structure in that area to support that. For instance, 104 is a one-lane road going in both directions. There's only one drive out of our neighborhood, and that will become crowded and most likely dangerous for residents to travel. In addition to that, there is also environmental impact that really concern all of us. And it also concerned MIPA, because Paramount has been asked to has submitted a draft environmental impact report, and that environmental impact report has currently been commented on by hundreds of people who are concerned, most of which are in our area, but some of which are local environmental groups, includes Taunton River Analysis Watershed folks. And, this will not just have the potential to impact Bridgewater, but it will have the potential to impact all the towns around Bridgewater and the rivers that lead into Lake Nip, or that Lake Nip is the actual beginning of. So there are a number of communities that are concerned. It will also create some situations where people that need to use 104 get to 24 are now going to encounter traffic, pollution, noise. And when we look at the boat ramp itself, it's there for the peaceful enjoyment of Bridgewater residents to go boating, fishing, kayaking. And, that what Paramount's proposing is not just a 55 plus community, as some people have mentioned. The scale development involves 4 new buildings, a restaurant, and a cafe. And there is no doubt that the impact of the area will be extremely serious from both an economic and also from an environmental perspective. And it will destroy the character of the neighborhood that surrounds it, which basically, I know from reading your mission statement, is something that you have all been asked to protect. So I urge you to, look at your, I looked at your mission statement. I thought it was wonderful. And I hope that you will consider the objectives of your own mission statement, and basically, that you will help us to avoid having this organization, which, from having read their 620 Deer report, I believe is mainly focused on how they can maximize their profit at the expense of any other consideration. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Jean Di Battista,
Thanks so much.
you're welcome.
Other citizens who would like to step forward?
Evening, Janet Hanson, Pleasant Street. Thank you. I can't say anything much more than what everybody else is saying, but I just want to say that there's another resident who is opposed to these changes to the zoning. My feeling is, when you buy a piece of property, you know what the zoning is, then you should be prepared. You shouldn't buy a piece of property to make it fit your needs. You fit the needs of the zoning. The PDD, if you make these changes, it will open it up to not have the planning board or anybody else have any leg to stand on for any other changes. This is just the first stepping stone for his Claremont Phase 4. And this is zoned a certain way. We shouldn't be making changes. Same thing when he was trying to get the restaurant put in. He basically was trying to get the PDD to be totally a different zone to fit that need. It was trying to fit a square into a circle into a square, however it goes, the round peg into a square. But everyone needs to realize that Claremont is once again asking a town to change the zoning bylaws to fit their need. Our zoning bylaws are there to serve and protect the town, not to be changed every time somebody wants to build something. You buy a property, like I said, You should already know what your limits are. This area needs to be protected. So many times this changes, and this cannot support this. I just urge you not to put this forward. Don't recommend it. End it. We can't keep changing a zone to fit their wants and desires, because it's just going to end up allowing them to do whatever they want. And this area is not theirs to do everything that they want. And it needs to be protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanson. Other residents?
I got 3 minutes, so I'm going to press start. Honestly, I really don't think you care about the taxpayers of Bridgewater, only because I'm a living testimony of how I see it work. If you have a little bit of time, why don't you take a drive on Saddle Drive? By the way,
President.
my name's Mike
Mr.
Williams.
President, he needs to identify himself.
Would you please?
Give me a chance. My name is Mike Williams. I live on 48 Saddle Drive. Right there's a wonderful neighbor. Now, if you have time, take a drive on Saddle Drive. Just drive by it. You got weeds growing through it. The asphalt's sticking up. It's a safety hazard. I went to this place right here. I gave you pictures, and okay, we're gonna look into it. Yeah, we're gonna put it on a work order, and that was about maybe I'll say 10 months ago. So obviously, you and the town council, I don't believe you're doing right by the taxpayers of Bridgewater. You should build a new asphalt road because it's not going to really cost that much, probably 20,000 most. I don't think you have the political will to do it. Honestly, that's how I feel. Now, as far as the changing of the zoning, if you allow the zoning changes, what you're going to allow every contractor in here to invest, right? So I look at it this way. You want to do this so you can get revenue. You want to do this so you can get revenue for the city of Bridgewater. You don't really care about our wants and our needs, how we feel about how we reside in our own community. That's how I see it. So I have this feeling that you guys have already made up your mind that there's probably going to be some development there. And I'm pretty sure if you guys are going to help go ahead and invest, build, you're probably going to hire a non-union company, right? And you're going to exploit their labor. I know exactly how you're going to do it. But if you're really honest and if you really had trust in your community, why don't you do what the community wants you to do? Why don't you listen to us instead of profit, your personal benefit? I got 50 seconds left. Just curious, right? I'll take the boat on the Nip Lake. You know, like when you put the boat in by yourself, that rope. Look, on the boat. How hard is it to put a pole, make convenient people on a boat? I just don't understand that. Every boat ramp should have something where you can tie a rope around, but it just goes to show you that you're out of touch with the people of Bridgewater. I just want to use up all my 3 minutes, that's all. Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Other citizens who care to step forward?
Raymond Dutta, and I live at 317 Lakeside Drive in Bridgewater. Thank you for hearing my comments, and thank you for your service to. I'd like to read my letter dated January 24th, 2023 into the record, if that's possible, and hopefully I won't exceed the 3 minutes. Dear Council, I am writing to you to express my concern and opposition to the proposed ordinance TFY 23006 to be discussed at the Town Council meeting on Tuesday, January 24, 2023. I urge you to reject it now and do not refer to committee. This zoning ordinance amendment does not align with master plan ideals, is not representative of responsible and sustainable development, and should be rejected. The opening sentence of Bridgewater's PDD zoning states, The purpose of this section is to allow the town to regulate development of planned industrial park in designated suitable areas so as to achieve significant revenue or employment benefits without adverse impact on their neighborhoods or on the town's natural resources. Bridgewater's master plan's land use goals are to provide clear, concise, transparent zoning regulations to guide regulatory boards and owners, and to balance land use and development with environmental stewardship and social equity. An approval of this zoning ordinance would work against both goals. How can Bridgewater zoning be clear, concise, and transparent when it can be amended at will to benefit a select few? Claremont's plans represent a scale of development that is not sustainable and will have significant impact to Bridgewater's natural resources and its neighborhood. An approval of this zoning amendment speaks against the master plan goal of balancing land use and development with environmental stewardship. In Claremont's recent submittal of the draft environmental impact report to MEPA regarding Lakeshore Center Phase 4, Claremont rejected less impactful alternatives presented in the environmental notification in favor of the proposed project that meets Claremont's financial expectations. This one zoning bylaw amendment tonight that we're here for is part of a larger whole regarding Lakeshore Center. Claremont Companies has noted in the DEIR submitted in MEPA that they will request 3 zoning changes, 1 zoning variance and 1 zoning amendment for Phase 4. The PDD includes already 580 residences, in addition to a large flex building, a hotel with over 100 rooms, 2 office buildings, and numerous parking lots. Claremont is now proposing in Phase 4 an additional 535 residential units for a total of over 1,100 residential units, 106 additional hotel rooms, a drive-through cafe, and a 179-seat restaurant. If this full phase of the project as proposed is allowed to go through, the number of Lakeshore Center residents will equal the population of Petersham, Massachusetts, near Worcester. Should Bridgewater's taxpaying residents bear this burden? Bridgewater's zoning ordinance states that the review by special permit granting authority will include a mixture of uses, site access, internal circulation and parking, probable traffic impacts, overall density, building location, overall project layout, provision and design of open space, visual impact on adjacent ways and neighborhoods, and drainage and water resource impact. With regard to mixture of uses, the proposed zoning amendment does not represent a mixture of use and adds a 3rd large residential complex to an already residentially dense development. Site access and internal circulation and probable traffic impacts. The addition of another large residential complex, 225 units, to Lakeshore Center Drive will likely require traffic lights at the intersection with Route 104 due to increased vehicle trips and increased safety hazards on an already busy and fast stretch of road. Parking. An additional 348 parking spaces will increase impervious surface and stormwater runoff to the sensitive wetlands nearby. Large parking lots will contribute to heat islands in the area, impacting the surrounding natural resources and neighborhoods. Parking and stormwater management structures are proposed for construction within the 100-foot buffer zone. Density and building location and overall project layout. The proposed size of this building is 307,400 square feet and 348 parking spaces, 225 units. Other buildings on the site are of similar size. Does this existing and proposed further development provide connectivity, access to transportation?
Excuse me, Ms. Raymondetta.
I reached it. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for hearing my comments.
Thank you very much for your comments. Other citizens who care to step forward?
John Fitzgerald, 369 Lakeside Drive. First of all, thank you for your service here tonight. Obviously, you all care about Bridgewater if you're sitting there. So I'm hoping you care about their citizens too. We're here for a reason. Claremont wants to, obviously make money off the property. It's zoned the way it's zoned for a reason. If you start changing the zoning, all you're doing is letting everyone know we
rollover easement. They have a lot of property that they've already developed. I heard someone talk about the trees cut down across the nip. No one mentioned that. That was sick. That was real underhanded. I think they do a lot of that, and I really hope you'll think twice before you open the door. A lot of development. Yeah. There's also a lot of land that's protected, and the species and the animals that live there need protection. Really care about the community. Here we are. Why they want it that away, they could have. They've made enough. Made enough. Please don't.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Other citizens?
Hello, everyone. Rob DiBattista, 260. It's good to meet all of you. Wife, you moved here about a year and a half. So the area is new to us. We had looked at proper environment with the sort of a pure area in this part of Massachusetts, actually. And I'm assuming most of you have been in the area for many, many years. So you might be almost too close to what's occurring. But I would urge you to look outside of this area. Recognize how rare that area of Lake Nippenicket is actually in this part of Massachusetts, in addition to the whole state of Massachusetts. You'll have to go all the way up to northern New Hampshire or all the way up to northern Maine to find an area of that sort of ecological type environment. So I urge you to reject zoning change and look closer at trying to protect that as an environmentally pure area rather than trying to develop it into some sort of revenue generating commercial area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DiBattista. Other citizens who care to step forward?
My name is Frances Jeffries, and I'm at 35 Shaw Road. And I'm here to also speak on the zoning variance being requested. I moved to Bridgewater over 25 years ago, and one of my first introductions was to the natural wonders here and the importance of the water resource we have right in our community that also feeds into the rivers, which are both functional and recreational for us, and are now part of the National Wild and Scenic River System. We have a responsibility as citizens. That's why we're here tonight. And also, I think we represent many people who can't be here for various reasons of their own schedules. So the number you see here is not nearly the total number. But you have accepted a responsibility as the stewards for the rules that we thought were in place, that we accepted when we bought our properties and when we invested in this community. And now, what I don't understand is how someone who's not really going to invest in our community as a small business person would, but who comes and buys property, a sort of investment, and then wants us to begin to change everything we set in place to protect things like our own water resource. I can't fathom that we would give that away. I'm asking you tonight to be good stewards, to review that, to step back from the pressures I'm sure you feel from each other, from the company, from anything else. Step back from that and be a good steward to what we've committed to what we designed for ourselves, and to what will sustain this community in the long haul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other citizens for citizen public forum, open forum?
Thanks, Michael. Greetings, counselors. Carl Hunt, Austin Street, 36-year resident of Bridgewater and County. I come before you regarding the Plan Development District PDD zoning change order DFY 23 006 adult retirement community. This zoning change comes before you in advance of the issuance of a state permit to develop 6 large, mostly residential structures on the Bridgewater PDD at the NIP. I note the Claremont companies submitted a draft environmental impact report, EEA 16558, December 15, 2022. This development requires a state permit for their plans to proceed. In advance of that permit, Claremont is attempting to change the allowed uses for the property by enabling an adult retirement community. There are serious questions regarding such a zoning change, especially at this location. We've already heard a number of concerns. First, note this zoning change is for the entire site, not just one building. The proposed definition, number 11 under definition of this adult retirement community is, quote, residential facilities or developments which are occupied by persons 55 years of age and older, excluding their spouses or surviving spouses from said age requirement, and which may include residential units occupied by resident staff personnel of any age. I don't know what that means, but I'll explore it a little bit. There are no guarantees the proponent would not turn the entire property into such use if you pass the zoning. I'm not against 55 and over adult housing, but seriously question the proponent's intent putting this definition forward. It is confusing. Let's examine the definition further. It states an individual over the age of 55 may be housed and suggests children would be there. This is dissimilar compared to other over 55 housing in Bridgewater, where the children are not. This definition opens the door to added pressure to the regional school system and other town facilities and services. I point out again, the change applies to the entire PPD, not just buildings. Has the Town Planning Board and the Community and Economic Department been privy to the Phase 4 development plan? If so, what opinions have been offered? Note, Section 9.4.4 of the PDD zoning specifically requires the owner to submit a pre-application to the Planning Board. To my knowledge, this has not. Why is this important? Clearly, the change opens the door not only to pressure on the school, but also on other town services. Heard a little bit of that. All without proper consideration of the impact to the infrastructure, finance. Why is this brought to the town council without assessment from the town's professionals, including a build-out analysis, financial impact analysis, infrastructure analysis, specifically on the water supply and the delivery system, which is currently stressed, and the sewage treatment facility, which currently has volume limitations originating from the development. That could cost. Can the facility handle the growth? I'm on that treatment. Part of that. Without such information, it's impossible to know the impact zoning proposal have. We don't know the impact of town, this huge development.
Excuse me, Dr. Hunt, I must ask you to conclude your remark.
I further point to the purpose of the PPD, which was, quote, to allow the town to regulate development of planned industrial park in designated suitable areas so as to achieve significant revenue and employment benefits without adverse impacts on the neighborhoods or the town natural resources. Lastly, the state has an affordable housing crisis. This zoning does nothing, zero, to help maintain the 10% affordability. From an energy perspective, it's a disaster. There's no indication in any of their documents they will follow the Massachusetts stretch code, which the town of Bridgewater has inculcated because we are a green community. We must follow that code. Conclusion. It is premature to act on the order unless the town completes a thorough, complete impact.
Thank you, Dr. Hunt. Other citizens who care to step forward? Anyone else for citizen open forum? Once, going twice. Thank you all very much for your comments. We have no appointments to consider this evening. Hearings. There are no license transactions. We do have a presentation. Presentation is Bridgewater's Planned Development District zoning purpose, history, and considerations. And I would defer to Councilor Moore.
I think similar to what we've heard, I think we have a very important decision of us. The same thing came to me a bit ago. Learn about. Very difficult to do. There isn't one central set of information. But I wanted to make sure that I shared with at least everything that I knew to make sure that we're making. Michael, would it be possible to put that in presentation?
Keep going. Your left. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. One more. One more. There you go.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. We can jump to the next slide. So the first couple slides are just setting some context about zoning. I think everybody is familiar with zoning, but it's really important. I just want to spend in general, when communities are planning how they want to use, divide that land up, and then they make rules about each zone. For example, you might make a rule that says have any hazardous in the same area zones, and you rules you make locate the town so that as you're growing it, you're making intentional decisions where hopefully setting things up. So you can define a single use, say this is residential, or you can set up a zone and say this zone can be high level zones for groups like us and looking to get positive results in towns. Zoning is incredibly important. Decisions we make. So the purpose of it, I mentioned a few of these. The number one purpose is make sure we're separating incompatible land uses. Number two is make sure we're creating the most appropriate. For example, if we're trying to build a soccer field, we wouldn't put that. So you have to make sure that the land area fits. Third one here, and we've heard a lot of talk about this, is also make sure that it's the best of it. Right? We are a community of how we make work and work better for all of us. And so the way zoning is our method of making sure that we put the right things in the right areas. And then lastly, and this is a point of passion for me, is we have to make sure that our infrastructure is keeping up with these decisions, right? I mentioned in previous meetings, our residential growth has far outpaced everything else. It's outpaced the roads, they're in red. It's outpaced the schools are in red. It's outpaced the water's in red. So we need to make sure as we're making zoning decisions, give the town time to kind of catch up to these decisions. So that's zoning. Specifically, some of this was cited today, but our comprehensive master plan, so the big document that we are following to figure out how we go from where we are to where we want to be as a town, has a whole section on land. And one of the first things it says is the way land is used and developed affects all facets of the community: transportation, housing, natural environment, historic resources, public service delivery, education. Our decisions directly impact whether or not we make the town better or worse. And I don't know if everyone knows this, but today residential use is by far the biggest land use. It dominates land use. By comparison, industrial and commercial are about 6% of our land. So why does that matter? That matters because if we're bringing in another house, that house is bringing in children, that house is using town services, that house is really expensive, and we as a community have to invest in that type of development. If we bring in a warehouse pays tax, doesn't necessarily have the same investment. So the decisions we make around industrial and commercial determine how much we have to pay on the residential side. And then this last stat is interesting. So although Bridgewater has a lot of open land, it actually doesn't have a lot of developable. If you look at the master plan, only 6% of the land in Bridgewater can be developed according to the zoning criteria. And then when you look at things like environmental suitability, it's probably even less than that. So if we're talking about making changes in our town and what gets built and where it gets, there aren't a lot of options. So if we make the wrong decision now, in one of the options, it actually could potentially prevent us from being able to. So it's incredibly important. Like we were in like the red zone on the impact across the. And then the last thing, this is really important. So our whole master plan is built around this idea of density. We want to make sure that big populations of people in Bridgewater are put in the places where they're most effective in driving the economy. And for us, and for almost every other town in America that has successfully revitalized their downtown, that population density has to be down. Because those people who live there walk to local stores. Those businesses now have people coming into them, so that becomes valuable business real estate. And when it's valuable business real estate, the people who own those stores fix it up to attract the right people. So population density down, people don't drive to downtowns anymore. They're literally driven by the ability to walk into a store by the neighboring community. And so we're putting a lot of intention into building density down. We have a project over here. There's another one down the road a little bit. If we are also building population density somewhere else in town, we are throwing the balance way out of it. Because by design, we want population density in the center of town, less density as we get out. And then the very cherished spots that are near the highway, we want to use those for heavy machinery and big open spaces. Because we don't want those trucks driving through the entire town to try to get out to the highway. And we want people who are shopping to be able to kind of come in. So I say this because we have a plan. People have referenced the plan. It is our responsibility to make that plan work. And the way that we do that is, that's a little bit of background. Michael, maybe if we could go to the next. So now it's specifically to the PDD. I mentioned that I've spent a lot of time on this, but I also want to put a disclaimer here. This is my best understanding of it. We do not have a document, and I've asked, that says, give me everything about the PDD that's current, tell me all the changes. Does not exist. So I encourage everyone, do your own homework on this. You're hearing my version of my homework. But a takeaway is there's homework to try to figure out what's going on here. So in general, a PDD allows us to look at a proposed project and put special zoning in place so that the whole project. And we do this, one, because we're generally as a town in favor of that project. And two, we want to make it easier for that developer to deliver on this vision that we all like. So you create like these PDDs, and then it's a little easier to kind of get things through that are zoned within those. Michael, next. So, sorry, one before that, up arrow. Yeah. So we have written down as a town what we expect to happen in those PDDs. Other people have referenced this. In Bridgewater, we want to use PDDs to encourage the development of industrial. Think like Rainham High Tech Park. Think small buildings back in the woods, businesses that people can work, right? So we did that because we are expecting a revenue benefit and an employment. Without the adverse impact, we get the revenue and we also get a whole bunch of new. It's like the design here is start generating revenue for the town and do it in a way that is good for the town without. And then if we do that, we allow this special permitting process, so it's easier to do it. So we have conditions. It has to be at least 10 acres. It has restricted uses. What we've heard about is a recommended change to those uses. And it requires a special permit and a site plan. They have to tell us what the plan is. And when that plan changes, you have to talk about that change and make sure that it still works. So that's what we have in our literature. Michael, if you go to the next one. We also went beyond that, and we actually said, in addition to the PDD, we are going to put language in there that tells people what we want in that. And so in order of priority, you can use the whole thing for office space, because office space brings people to the town that don't also bring these other expenses, but it gives us places to work. So office space is allowed in PDDs. We encourage it. Similar thing with retail and commercial services. Up to 85% of the whole space can be that. Right? These are things that we want to bring to the town. Similarly, healthcare facilities, those benefit the people in town. Research and development, right? Brings educational and STEM opportunities to the. This is what a PDD is supposed to. And then as we start to go down the list, there's also like, and I guess these are okay, right? You could put maybe up to 25% of the total space could be motel in the whole park. So we're not looking for 50 motels next to each other. We're looking for 25% at most. And then now we're even going down. And if you want to put manufacturing and assembly, up to 5% of the permissible space is for that. And then lastly, similar for. And notice so far there's nothing about residential. These are not for residential, but it's overlaid on residential. So if you wanted to do residential, it's okay if it's a single family house on one lot. This is what we as a town decided these developments. And in these special permits that I've found, these additional conditions, these were referenced. It can't use more than 100,000 gallons of water, sewage per day. And we heard, I mean, it doesn't take a lot of units to get, and if you look at our water situation in Britain, we are at 85% utilization on our water. We have 15% of our water left. And the reason like these restrictions are in there is because we don't want to get to 0% and turn on a faucet and have nothing work. This matters. The other thing, it can't negatively affect fire protection services. These are 4-story buildings, and when the emergency services have to respond to them, they have to go up 4 flights of stairs. And when something happens on the other side of town, they're literally on the opposite side of town, 4 stories up. So the more big things we build here, the less we can do to support the rest. And then lastly, there is a clause in there that says that these developments will pursue with the town any proposed improvements to upgrade or extend the existing infrastructure in conjunction with plans for future development. We've recognized already in the literature that our infrastructure cannot support other development here. Can't. And we said, if we're going to do more development, we're going to get together and figure out how to. So that's the PDD. I think everyone knows where it is. It's across from Lake Nugget. Michael, we can go to the next. This is a different view. So this is a filter over our town of where in our town are you allowed to build. So we're talking about the need to offset all of these residential expenses with commercial. Where can that actually happen? The red dots are the only places in Bridgewater right now where you. And the ones along 18 are probably sitting in a pond. There aren't many options here. So we're talking about really one of the only options, one of the very few options in town where commercial might still work. And we've got a proposal to take it all away. Can't move it. There's not some other area in town that all of a sudden becomes good for commercial. That's it. And then this thing I've highlighted, we heard a lot about today, there are other considerations, right? It is right next to one of our big natural resources. And there aren't many of those either. And there's a lot of considerations and literature to read through about the impact of development. And from an archaeological perspective, there are two sites there. If you look at the literature, there are like 2 historical sites in this property that need to be considered. So I say this just because I think there are easy decisions that we make, and there are hard. This is a hard decision. This is one that requires us to do a lot of homework so that we quite literally don't break the environment, don't break. This is what we expected and what's happened. So on the left, these are all of the things in our code that you can do with property expected. This is right. On the right is what's actually happened and being hotel. That aligns with the goal. 2 office buildings, yep, those align. The flex warehouse space, yep, that's tucked away, that aligns. 2 massive residential, 300 units, 289 units, multiple stories high, in a zone where we said we don't want it. Right now, our biggest population density in town is next to an off-ramp. It doesn't do anything for walking traffic. It's not walkable for the affordable housing to get on public transport. There aren't jobs down the street. These are like 2 massive population centers in the middle of nowhere that are not part of our, and they're allowed because of the way that zoning works. And then so those are the checklists. Those are the things that are already there. On the bottom are the things that could. Heard about the proposal. So what's being proposed is a 4-story condo community, another 160 units, residential. Think bedrooms and bathrooms, just like Lake and Access. Bedrooms and bathrooms. Bedrooms and bathrooms. Bedrooms and bathrooms bring more water, more infrastructure. They are not, the things on the left are not bedroom and bathroom. These are. So condo community, bedroom and bathroom. An over 55 residential community, it's a condo with an age restriction. Bedrooms and bathrooms. 150 unit assisted living facility. We do need assisted living. This is one I think we look at, but it's also, theme is bedrooms and bathrooms, right? How many bedrooms and bathrooms can you put in? And then you've got another hotel. Think about the 25% limitation we originally designed. There's a 1-story cafe. On the diagram, it looks like maybe it's like a Dunkin' Donuts kind of thing. And then there's the restaurant, which you've heard about. The things in yellow are things that we specifically did not include in our idea. And more importantly, they are things that we did include in other parts of the town. So if you do them here and we do them in the other part of the town, we have multiple population centers of density. And I would be embarrassed to go to our school committee and you can't do both. Can't. So this is really what we're being asked to discuss right now. So Michael, maybe the last slide. So, or 2 more. So this is a drawing if you haven't seen it. The items that are sort of shaded in brown are the proposed buildings. All of the arrows are new. And someone else mentioned it's over 550 new bedrooms and bathrooms. Bedrooms and bathrooms. It's a massive development. Massive. And Michael, maybe the last. So for me, I mentioned before, like, I've been looking into this to try to learn about it, and I have more questions than I have answers. So I just want to share with you the questions that I think before we do anything with this property, we need to just make sure we know the answers to these. You can have your opinion about what you think with the answer, but like we need the answer. And the first one is, have we already exceeded the water consumption limit? 100,000 gallons a day for that whole site. Have we exceeded? We need to do diligence on that. And are those even accurate limits? Has that changed, right? And do we have the infrastructure to put in another 200,000 gallons a day, right? I mean, we've had a bunch of conversations about water. Trying to find someone who can use more of it is not. So the next thing is, I think, is like this population density. You're building this allows us to build a population center as far away as you can get from where we act. And we can't have 2. If you do this, downtown revitalization doesn't. Because we can't have both. We can't have population growth. So I think we need to understand that. And if the commercial isn't here, where do you put it? But what else is moving? Where are we putting in the stores that are supposed to help alleviate our tax? right? And then the plan itself has changed significantly since it was proposed. Does anyone at this table even know what the current plan is? I've been looking. I don't know what the current plan is. Best guess is what was submitted to the state. And then the schools, like, I mean, we've just been funneling kids into a school system that is struggling to keep up. And it's irresponsible for us. We cannot do that until these other plans catch up. And then same thing, public safety. There's the impact on that. And then the last thing we've heard a lot about, the project does have environmental and these are significant concerns. If you go visit the community and you go walk around there, and there's the Keith House, I mean, there are very few places in you can go walk along the water, actually feel like you're walking on the water. This is one of them, and I think you've heard from the residents. To keep it that way, I think it's really important. So I'll close with this. I think the way that we design a good community is to be intentional in how we zone the community. And I think the easy decision here is just to say yes, and it goes through. Hard decision is to put in the homework and actually understand how this fits into the big vision and the implications of saying yes. So that is the presentation. I'm happy to answer questions, or if people have additional understanding of the area.
Yes, Councilor Lindy.
Thank you for helping educate me as a new counselor with all of this, because it's a lot to take in, and you've spent a lot of time doing it, and I personally appreciate the presentation.
Councilors with questions or comments? Councilor Wood.
Question about the planning board. So, as we've known from years of experience, zoning changes have to go through the planning board, and if you look at the history of the planning board in Bridgewater and Massachusetts in general, it's set up as almost an isolated board to make decisions with a depth of analysis into this. Do you feel that our current planning board has enough education about the PDP to go through and make a similar evaluation over whether they would or would not recommend this piece?
I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but I can say I think in general, the people who decided what this should be when it's are not the same people that are deciding what it should be. And I think there is a big disconnect in understanding between those two ends of what we created and like deciding. So I would say my recommendation across the board, committees, the planning department, us as a council, anyone who's trying to pull all the levers we to design the community needs to really know how this works, like really know. I think everyone would benefit from a refresher on that.
Thank you. Councilor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of questions, and thank you for the presentation. When I was approached by the developer and asked if I would sponsor this, I asked, what this was all about, and I'll get to that later on the agenda. But this was brought to me in November, and what the developer had asked that he wanted to do was just simply a 55-plus community. And since then is when all this proposal went to the state of what he really wants to do long-term with the project. So it's hard for us as a council, because when we are asked to do something on behalf of a citizen or behalf of a developer or behalf of anybody, we have to start the process, and it's hard for us to go into the weeds and the details. It's up to us to bring it forward, have the discussion, but there's also other committees that really dive into the weeds, and that's what you asked of the experience or level of the planning board to be able to, dissect what the project is. What I was focused on when I sponsored this was simply just the 55-plus place, because we can talk about housing issues and things like that all night long. I don't want to see a lot of potential commercial space go eaten up down there either. But I thought that maybe this one project may help the town and help with the housing shortage around here. So it's hard for us because we get things as a starting point. And we don't have the proposal before us tonight. That'll be presented, if it moves forward tonight, that'll be presented to the planning board, where all the concerns that the residents brought up and others can be addressed. Maybe the size of the change may need to come down to a simple small spot or something like that. But the other thing too that I read before I responded to this was the master plan. And it also talks about how we need to somehow address diverse housing options in this community. And there really isn't a lot of diverse housing options. I thought a 55-plus community would be another diverse place, whether that's the proper location or not. But it is hard for us because, we don't get the weeds of the details. We get an idea and we're like, oh, okay, let's just move it through the process, answer the questions, whether it's good or not, or bad. It'll also come, if it goes forward tonight, it'll come back to us for a final vote. I know that. And hopefully, if it does come back to us, a lot of changes have been made. Because I do think the scale of what was presented to the state is probably a little bit too large for what my appetite would be. I'd rather see something. So yeah, there's a lot of issues, and it's hard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Other comments or questions?
Actually, if I can just add one
Councilor
comment.
Wood.
So the folks may not know, but we recently had a change of staff here in the town. So our community economic director, former director, left, and we have a brand new one. I met with him today, not on this subject, on other subjects, but he's only been here for a couple weeks. So it would be great if he could also take a look at this and see how it fits into all the other things he's learning about the town.
Thank you, Counselor. If there are no other comments or questions, we can proceed to the town manager's report. Mr. Dutton, if you please.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. Just a very brief reference on the fire station project. The design phase obviously is underway. We've set up weekly progress meetings and also scheduled interviews with fire personnel in order for the architect to refine the schematic plan and translate that into more definitive plans. Still shooting for a September bid date. The OPM and the designer working very well. This is actually, I think, their second or third project that they've done jointly, but so far very well, working very well. Detailed topographic survey is being completed, and once that is done, then soil testing and borings will go on after that to confirm the site work that needs to be done prior to laying the foundation. So that's what I have in the fire station. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the town manager? And seeing none.
All right. On to High Street dam removal and the bridge replacement. There's a project that's been in the works for probably about 6 years, and it is finally out to bid, and a bid accepted, and a contractor, general contractor under contract. It is a significant project for us, and it'll have a significant impact on High Street for a 4 or 5 month period, certainly. The start date is this week. The end of this week is the official start date, and substantial completion will be the end of December 2023, so this coming end of December. The road will be closed. I've mentioned this before, but we have a little more definitive road closure information that we will get out more thoroughly over the next month or so, and then right up until it closes. But road will close around June 15th, and will be closed for at least a 4 month period while the bridge is removed and completely replaced. So we will have road closure for at least 4 months, starting on or around June 15th. We're in close contact with the schools regarding busing, and other than that, we will be getting notice out to all the folks that that live in that area, certainly, and we'll get out as much notice and information as we can through press releases on Facebook, certainly our town website and so forth. So we've got a bit of a strategy to get that done. Just so you are aware and residents are aware, there's no weekend or holiday construction without permission from the town, advance permission from the town. Hours typically on the construction site will be 7 a.m. to 3:30. I can tell you that the winning bid for the dam removal and bridge replacement was Manafort Construction. It came in at a cost of $5,867,000. That's well within the budget, and we have secured grant funding with the assistance of the Department of Ecological Restoration. We have secured grant funding from multiple sources that will more than cover the total project cost. So that's the good news. So the dam removal piece, for those that are interested, there will be a diversion of the river into the existing mill race, channel grading and restoration, including installation of channel and bank structures along about 500 feet of Town River, excavation, handling, and offsite disposal of up to 2,500 tons of contaminated sediment. So testing did reveal that there were contaminations in some of the sediments in the impoundment, so that will be disposed of properly at a licensed facility off-site. And there'll be, in terms of the bridge replacement, obviously the existing bridge, which is really 3 or 4 semi sort of box culvert, will be removed, completely removed, and a new bridge built in that location. Obviously, once the bridge is in, then there'll be full depth roadway reconstruction, parking area, and driveway restorations for those driveways that are impacted. There aren't many of them impacted by the work. Utility replacement, replacements over the bridge. There'll be temporary utility placements for water, sewer, and gas over the bridge on a temporary bridge just to carry the utilities, so there'll be no disruption in utility service. Should be no disruption in utility service to anybody. National Grid will relocate one pole, so that'll be on your agenda coming up because they're the only utility that has to come in for pole placements. And just in terms of, just so you know, there are, the work has to be done around what are referred to as time of year restrictions. Time of year restrictions are placed by state and federal authorities in order to allow unfettered fish migration upstream and then downstream later on. So there's no in the water activities between March 15th to June 30th, and then again from September 1st to November 15th. And there's a little bit of leeway on the June 30th one. Most of the fish, I think it's herring that come up are pretty much done, what I'm told, by June 15th. And so the contractor will likely ask for a waiver of a couple weeks on that restriction. But just so you know, those are the time of year restrictions. It doesn't mean that work can't continue around the site. It just means you can't work in the water in order to get your job done during those time periods. And so other than that, obviously for most residents, it'll be a fascinating project to watch. The bridge is, parts of that bridge are potentially several hundred years old, but it's, the demolition and the deconstruction will be very carefully documented so that we will know exactly, well, we'll have a much better idea of what underside pieces of the bridge date back, how far they date back, better idea of the history of that location. So that is very, obviously, as I was mentioning, residents are most concerned about the road closure, and beginning of February, we'll have a whole campaign to get notification out to people that use that road And people that don't use that road should know as well that road will be closed beginning on or around June 15th.
Thank you. Mr. Dutton, other questions for the town manager? Yes, Councilor Moore?
First.
All right, through you to the town manager. You mentioned that the target date, I think, is June 15th. I don't know the exact date that schools get out. Say it's the end of June. Just to avoid having to reroute, it's possible for us to delay start until school year so that
I can certainly reach out and ask the contractor. Originally, the closure was June 1st, and based on the contractor's timeline, it then moved to June 15th. So possible that it won't be until after that. But the contractor has a very short period of time to actually close the road and demolish the bridge and demolish the dam. That's 4 months to do all of that work, and then the ancillary stuff on that don't include the bridge or the dam itself will happen for a longer period of time. But I'll certainly reach out and ask if that's feasible.
Thank you. Councilor Wood?
Thank you. So my street was really quiet until the bridge at the farm supply was replaced, and everybody learned that my street was a cut through. I assume that the work is not going to disrupt the connection between High Street. Is that right?
That is correct.
And I would also assume that the preferred method, since there's really no other path, is to go down Oak Street and cross over the broken Oak Street Bridge. So while we have the state here looking at this High Street Bridge, is it possible to get them to finally look at and focus on Oak Street and Oak Street Bridge, since it's going to be a major bypass for at least 4 months and probably a lot longer, because people are going to find out that Oak Street is a faster cut through than Hyde is.
No, that's an excellent point. We are obviously going to discourage people from using Oak Street just because it's currently a one-lane bridge. It's structurally sound, but it's a one-lane bridge, not appropriate for certainly heavier vehicles. So that will be noticed on a detour route. In terms of Oak Street, absolutely, we've asked MassDOT, and we've also asked Mass Historic Commission potential funding sources to replace the bridge deck in something that is appropriate, a two-lane structure or two-lane roadbed that somehow tries to match the construction technique of the underside of that bridge. We have no potential with Mass Historic. Got a hard no on that, and they explained why. And we have some opportunity possibly with Mass DOT and some possibly with federal funds that are making their way out, part of the infrastructure. So my hope is that we can begin the Oak Street project very shortly after we finish the High Street project. Depends on.
Thank you. Councilor Perry?
Thank you. That's still one of my questions there. So there will be connections between the High Street Bridge side and Wall Street, and we'll also have access to the highway from that end. As an extension of that question, however, obviously the condition of Oak Street is pretty poor as well. So if we're going to get a lot of extra traffic down that way, it's going to really wreck the condition of that. Is there any possibility of potentially repaving that beforehand in anticipation of maybe early spring? Because we're also going to get probably offshoots onto Crapo Street, and Crapo itself obviously has some issues. So, as a way of preparing for all that extra traffic going to those directions, we might want to look into upgrading at least the roadways there before we open up that can of worms with that project.
I'll find out. Let you know.
Thank you. Further questions for the town manager? Seeing none, thank you. We can move to legislation for action. First item on our agenda is Order FY23-040, Certified Assessor's Compensation. I would defer, if I could please, to the town manager for comment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This order before you is proposing an adoption of state law, which grants the assessor a stipend in the event that the assessor achieves certain certifications through the International Assessors Association or the state association. Our assessor is highly certified already, and these additional certifications would grant her grant the position a boost in pay. And this, I can tell you, as I just mentioned, our assessor is one of the most qualified and certified statewide. So we're quite proud of that.
Thank you very much. I would note that the Budget and Finance Committee has recommended approval by a vote of 3-0, and the Finance Committee has done likewise by a vote of 6-0. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none. Thank you. That measure passed. Moving on to Order FY 23-041, acceptance of non-recurring revenue to capital. This refers to the amount of $120,720 from the Department of Corrections as mitigation funds for the hosting of the prison complex. Would refer to the town manager.
Can't really add too much more to that, Mr. President. This, I think, as several councilors know, this is a significant decrease in the amount that we normally would get. Over the years prior to the 2020 fiscal year, 2021 fiscal year, we were getting up in the high 200s and then into the low 300s. In this particular case, we asked the DOC Finance Office what the reason for the significant drop was. It was twofold. It was one, the line item in the DOC's budget was cut. The line item that they used to distribute funds to cities and towns that host DOC facilities was cut very significantly, and then the population of the actual our actual DOC facility dropped as well during the time of COVID, if you recall. So those two factors reduced it quite.
Thank you. I note that the Budget and Finance Committee had recommended approval by a vote of 3-0. Finance Committee at their meeting had recommended approval by a vote of 6-0. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Wood. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Lynch.
We still are going to follow up on our legislative delegation, trying to see if we can push them to.
We have a little bit of time while the state formulates its budget, but absolutely, I'll have a letter for the council's review and signature.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Wood.
Yeah, so I attended the Finance Committee meeting after our Budget and Finance meeting because they had questions on a couple other things. But Lori from our Finance Department was there, and I had her note something that's very interesting, which is not well known, which is we are a host community to an MBTA station, which is well known, but we give back money to the state. And in this case, it's similar to this amount. So while it's coming in from the prison, it's going back out to the T. So we actually don't gain anything from this except to cover our T costs as part of the overall annual finance. So I think to what Mr. Lindy said is great. I think we need to ask our state reps and others to support both issues in that we shouldn't be penalized because we have a T station, and we shouldn't just expect that it's an offset from the prison mitigation. Because it just kind of works out that we're net zero. We're pretty close to it when you look at both sides of that issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Perry.
Thank you. And just an extension of that, if it's possible to somewhat calculate maybe what the cost of the town is to have the prison in based on services, based on water. If there's a potential number that we can develop to add to that argument, I would certainly like to know what that might be, to see, you know, what are we spending to support the prison and then what we're getting back in mitigation. It could be a large gap in between the two.
Thank you, Counselor. There are no further discussion. We have a motion and a second. I would entertain a motion for approval.
We had that one
vote.
discussion.
Missed.
Ron was first, I was second.
All-
Yeah, we got it all.
We're
We
going
just need a
right
vote.
to All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I see none. Thank you very much. Moving on to order FY 23-042, transfer order, Community Preservation Act, Old State Farm Trail Project. Mr. Dutton, would you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is fairly straightforward. This helps to fund the required survey and recording of an easement for a trail along portions of the town river and the DOC property. This comes to you pursuant to legislation that was passed 2 years ago and then again last year, or amended last year, which allows the town to own an easement for trail access, meaning public access along portions of the I guess it's Pond River at that point, and then over DOC open space property. In return for allowing, it essentially was given to us as mitigation for the fire services, setting up a new fire academy at the Bridgewater DOC property. While we get the ownership of it, of the easement, we do have to cover the cost of the survey and the recording of that survey. The NRTB, Natural Resources Trust of Bridgewater, and the town have worked very closely together. They have fundraised a significant portion of the overall amount and a total amount of $60,600. They have fundraised the difference between that and the $40,000 that's in front of you now, as recommended by the CPC.
I thank you. The Budget and Finance Committee have each recommended approval by the same votes as I've indicated, 3-0 by the Budget and Finance Committee and 6-0 by the Finance Committee. I would entertain a motion. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none. Thank you. Moving on to order FY 23-043, Bridgewater Raynham Regional School District Capital Allocation. Mr. Dutton, if you would kindly comment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think as the council recalls, or at least I won't say the old counselors, the returning counselors will recall that that we had voted funds as part of the capital assessment for the school. Voted funds, part of those assessments, part of those appropriations were used for a piece of the project. Were used for a purpose other than how the council voted them, and we had asked the schools to return that piece of the capital funding, and then we would reallocate those to the uses to which the school had put them. So in front of you now, we did receive back from the school a check for $467,780, and we are now reallocating or asking the council to vote to reallocate those funds across technology related items that the district actually used the funds for, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. And I would note once again that the Budget and Finance Committee had recommended approval by a vote of 3-0. The Finance Committee had recommended approval by a vote of 6-0. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none. Thank you. Moving on to proposed ordinance FY 23-007, acceptance of local tax option retail marijuana tax. And I would defer to Councilor Wood for comment.
So this is, thank you. This is straight out of Mass General Law, Chapter 64. And so now that the town has voted to allow the conversion into retail from the medical. This gives us the opportunity to tax those retail sales. And if you survey towns that have retail establishments in them, it's predominantly 3%, so it doesn't really make any sense to make it any lower. So this just sets the tax rate and allows us to accept state laws.
Thank you very much. At their meeting, the Budget and Finance Committee had voted to recommend approval by a vote of 3-0. The Finance Committee at their meeting had voted to recommend approval by a vote of 6-0. I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I see none. Moving on to proposed ordinance FY 23-008, cash policy retail marijuana tax reserve fund. Once again, please to Councilor Wood for comment.
President, point of information.
Yes.
Quick clarification. So for the last ordinance, we voted to send that to advertising.
It is to be voted to send to advertising. That's
Okay,
correct.
I just want to be clear on that. And this one, we're also voting to send to advertising.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. Councilor Wood?
Sure. So in the past, the town council has set cash policies, free cash policies, and other capital policies. During the discussion about what we would do with the marijuana tax, if we saw some, there were all sorts of ideas. Segregating them into a specific fund allows the town council to make decisions later on as to how those funds would be used, whether they would be used for requests from the school system for an educational program on drug and alcohol abuse, or whether it would be used to finance, say, like Oak Street Bridge, or whether it would be dog park or something else. So this would be to set up an account where those funds could be directed and used later and not go directly into the general fund, which is the default method. This ordinance just simply sets up the account, doesn't fund it. You can see that it says without further appropriation. That's a separate step. And I've asked Mr. Dutton to forward, I don't know if he's done that yet, forward an email that our finance director had sent me. It talks about the various steps in use. So this is similar to a stabilization account that we've used. So this action simply sets up the account. It doesn't make use of it, or it doesn't.
Thank you very much. I note that the Budget and Finance Committee had recommended approval by a 2-1 vote, and the Finance Committee had recommended approval by a vote of 6-0. I would entertain a motion to send to advertising.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Yes, Councilor.
If I could just, I know, and I'm certainly in favor of sending it to advertising, but I just would ask my colleagues to really think about this. I was the dissenting vote at the Finance Committee, Budget and Finance last evening, and I mean, we have about 7, maybe 8 capital stabilization funds right now where different pots of money go in there. We get free cash certified, and a pot of money goes in here, and we vote on that every year. This is similar to that. When this whole discussion the past 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer, since 2016, about the money that we're going to get from retail marijuana, how it could be used for our budget. Yeah, this policy would allow us to use it for budget, but I do think it's sort of being put aside for capital needs and not so much operational needs. And being a member of the Budget and Finance Committee, we got, and I'm sure you all might have got it, I got the second quarter report today on the trends in the revenues of the town, and some things are very, very tight. In my opinion, the retail marijuana revenue that we get through the sales tax implemented by local receipts should be part of the revenue projection for operating expenses in the budget. When we get the local receipts, we have meals tax estimates, excise tax estimates, we have hotel tax estimates. We have all these estimates. I think that this, in my opinion, this tax, this estimate, this retail marijuana tax should be part of that, which would help our town department and would help our finance team better put together a budget when other areas within those revenues are starting to tighten up as we move forward in the future years. So I just would rather see it become part of the revenue stream and not tie it up in a sense. Yeah, we could probably use it for anything as indicated, but we have 7 or 8 of those accounts already for capital needs, for liability purposes, for that. And we saw the need tonight for some school capital needs. So that's just my thought. So as it goes to advertising, I would ask you to ask my colleagues to give us some consideration as to whether we really need another capital fund.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Wood?
So I don't disagree with Councilor Gallagher, but one of the things I will do between now and the time it comes back from advertising, I'll check again with Tony and the finance department. So like we vote on ambulance receipts, we might be able to vote a certain amount out of this account back into the operational fund. I'll check on that. The issue that I saw when coming up with this concept is that unlike our excise tax and some of our other fees that we get, right now it's really a crystal ball as to how much we're going to get. So the budget process is an approval of expense. It's not an approval of revenue. We use revenue projections to come up with what we think the town manager can expend, and that's why the budget resolution is so important, because it creates that bag of money for the town manager to figure out where the expenses are going to be paid. So one mechanism that we could use on this one is to say, as the revenues grow or they stabilize, to vote a certain amount back into the general fund as part of the annual budget process. And so there it would actually fund the operational side, not the capital. So I'll do that investigation. I'll come back with that information when it comes back from advertising.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Perry.
Thank you. Yeah, just to that point, and speaking to what Mr. Gallagher said, I think we don't really know what we're going to generate in revenue at this time. It's really early. So in order to budgetize and make plans for any of that, I think we would probably need a year or two of experience of what we're going to receive to have any idea what we could potentially contribute to operational. So I think, again, if we to get started, the direction that we're going in might be the best direction, and then after a year or two revisit how we contribute maybe to operationals, knowing what we're going to receive and be able to better plan for going forward.
Thank you, Councilor. Further comment? No. We have a motion and a second to send to advertising. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none. Thank you. Order FY23-044, acceptance of funds, Council on Aging donation. And I would defer to the town manager.
Mr. President, this is a very nice gift from Edward and Donna Henney of $2,500 to fund a new senior center coffee brewing station, and it will obviously require your approval, but needs to be referred to Budget and Finance Committee.
Thank you very much. I would entertain a motion for referral to the Budget and Finance Committees.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Yes, Councilor Moore.
I just wanted to say thank you to Edward and Donna. Is it Henny?
Heaney.
Heaney? That's a very generous donation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor. Indeed it is. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Thank you. Moving on to proposed ordinance FY23-006, proposed Bridgewater zoning ordinance amendment, adult retirement community and planned development district. This has been brought forward by Councilor Gallagher. I would refer to him for comment.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I have to recuse myself due to a conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, as this has been talked about a lot this evening, the process, as I mentioned earlier, is we get approached to sponsor certain various articles and so forth as a counselor. And I spoke to the developer back in November of what they were requesting to do, and I said, yeah, I'll put that forward so it goes through the process. And we put that off for a couple of months due to meetings and holidays, and the planning board really hasn't had a meeting for a while, so it's being brought forth this month. And this past Wednesday, a week ago Wednesday, there was a Zoom meeting that I attended with the developer and a few other officials in town. And my understanding from what I was being told is that he's simply just looking for a 55-plus community. And that was my impression. And since then, all this other potential development issues have come up that I wasn't aware of that he filed. So, and I think that this zoning change, to me, is specific to that one development. Maybe he's got grandiose ideas of building a condo complex and the restaurant across the street, which came up a couple years ago, and I don't know how deep he is into that. So putting this, I wouldn't want to see a zoning change to allow for all of that, but at least I'd like to put this forward to the planning board so the issues and concerns that have been addressed can come up. Again, we don't have the plan. It's one of those catch-22s as a council. We don't get the full plan before us when something's asked of us. We're supposed to put it through the process. This will come back to us for a final vote, and hopefully by then we'll know exactly what we're up against. But I don't think what I was told he's proposing through this specific ordinance is a restaurant, a assisted living place, and a condo. It's simply one 55 plus 225 unit building. That's what my impression is. So I figured that would go through the. Now, if things change, then we certainly would change our vote. So that's why I am introducing it. I'm not introducing a whole slew of buildings down there. It was just simply one idea that the developer had. So if we want more information as a council, we can certainly ask for that now. But the normal process is it comes to us, it's referred out, and it comes back. But I'm open to anything tonight, because I know there are a lot of concerns that were addressed tonight. And I have some concerns too.
Councilor Moore.
I'd like to make a motion to table this, and would love a second just for discussion.
We have a motion and a second to table this proposed ordinance.
So point of order.
Yes,
So
Councilor Ward.
the action of tabling is to kill the item. And so is this point of information or order? I don't know. But anyway, so the action of tabling it would remove the item from the agenda basically forever unless it was reintroduced in some other manner.
But it could be reintroduced
So
with new information or
yeah,
right?
Postpone it?
Yeah.
So if I can add a comment without adding any motion or a second. I agree with Councilor Gallagher. My reading of this was pretty narrow. I saw the presentation with a lot of other ideas, but I'd like to hear from what I consider the subject matter experts in zoning, which include the new director of economic development as well as the planning board. That's why we have a planning board, is to look at this in the larger sense and to see what's going on with all the plans, and see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, then they're going to recommend no, and then common sense makes us pretty much follow their recommendation. But they'll have a hearing and bring in other elements into this. So I think we as a council, as a legislative body, shouldn't make a prejudgment on this. We should let these subject matter experts in zoning, which the planning board, do that for us.
We have a motion and a second. Yes, Councilor.
So maybe just to talk through a little bit about thinking. So I think there are a few things that I think we need to provide at the start of that. So we are the start of a bunch of people that are about a bunch of work and bring back something specific to this ordinance. I think the pieces of it that I think are missing are really like our understanding of the bigger picture plan. And so if this does go through and it comes back as a yes, and they find a way to make this project work, there are X number of new bedrooms and bathrooms as far away from the center of town as you can possibly get. And we have not, as a town council, had a good conversation about what is our actual plan for this town. What are we trying to drive? And so I like the idea, and I like having the experts weigh in on this. My concern is more about, is this the right time to put it on that belt so that it goes through that process? Or do we have a little bit of work to do ahead of time before we introduce it? And so I think, if postponing it maybe to just give us time to have those conversations was an option, that's sort of what I'm looking for. I feel like we don't know enough about the project. We don't know enough about how the project fits into what we're trying to do as the town, and we don't know enough about the impacts across the whole town to say like now is the right time to put. Does that make sense?
It does. If I could just follow up, Mark, for a second. But that's why we hire now a planner that has credentials and a director that has experience to give us that counsel of what to do. They need to be able to see it.
Can we get the? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, Councilor.
I just do not think we have enough information to move this forward tonight. And I don't think we have enough information to move this forward tonight. Table, postpone, whatever. I think we have to listen to the people that came here. And however I can take a vote to make that happen, that's what I'm going to do.
Councilor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess this is going to be referred to the Planning Board and Community and Economic Development Committee of the Council too, right? Is that, I don't know what's on your red sheet there.
That's right.
But I know there's a red sheet. Okay, so it's going to be referred to a subcommittee of the council as well.
Yeah.
In addition to the Planning Board. So, to Councilor Wood's point, maybe those three members, I don't know who's on there. There's three new councilors. I don't know who's been put on there, but certainly going to be a learning curve for if it's a new counselor on there. I know we lost a very seasoned counselor who was on there that understood pretty good. So you will have council representation if it's referred out.
A question on that. So in the process that it goes through with those, do we also get an assessment of how it fits into the overall town goals? Does that come back to us as a data point? Like, can we request that
Yes.
as a data point?
Yeah, so the interesting part about the master plan is the planning board actually approves it. So they're kind of the owner of the master plan. Although, ideally we need to be aware of all the components of the master plan and think about the strategy that goes into implementation of it. I really get your point about moving density out to the outer edge, which is near the highway, becomes a transient population without much support of downtown, that sort of thing. But it also meets the state's housing goals at the same time of trying to have additional housing units at somewhat an affordable rate. But yeah, so they could bring in other experts too. There's nothing stopping the planning board from pulling in seasoned experts in the area of the PDD that's hard to figure out.
Councilor Perry.
The only role of we don't direct that. The planning board directs that. So I think that's an important kind of distinction from that, right? They may come back with something that just says, recommend it, or I do recommend it. So I just want you to be aware of that, just to clarify kind of what their actual obligation is. They can have a hearing, they can do as much or as little as they want with that hearing, And then their only role in that process is to bring back something to you all that says, we had the hearing, we either legislate.
Thank you. Councilor Perry.
Thank you. So just looking at the ballpark picture, I've been certainly based on your presentation, Mr. Moore. As you said, we as a counselor, individual counselors as a group, need to do a lot more homework on it. So I wouldn't want to see us table it at this point because, again, having the active piece of legislation gives us something to work on. So I wouldn't recommend that. As far as sending it to committee, and again, I agree, would go to CEDC and the planning board. I believe each individual group to look at it first individually and then plan a joint meeting together, I believe, to discuss what each group's findings are and bring out more discussion about that. In the same time, I would recommend certainly, again, maybe getting a presentation from our new CEDC director, maybe giving us his input on PDD, his thoughts on generally what we could do in that area, so the council as a whole could be educated about that. I've certainly heard everyone's comments. I know many people have commented on not wanting to see this go through, but this is actually, I think, a way for us to deal with it appropriately and let the different boards review it, see what needs to be done, what is in the best interest, review all the different environmental concerns, water concerns, master plan concerns, and come up with a decision instead of just kicking the can down the road. I think that's what tabling will potentially do at this point in time. So I would not be in favor of tabling. I would be in favor of definitely letting the different groups do the homework behind it so we can make a more informed decision on it going forward. So I would be in recommendation of sending it to CEDC and planning.
Just with respect to the point you made, Councilor, concerning the recommendation that might come from the council tonight, the council may consider sending this proposal to a joint session of the Community and Economic Development Committee together with the planning board. That is our customary practice, not to have separate meetings in that regard. One point I would like to make otherwise is that I don't know that there really should be a great deal of ambiguity with respect to what was intended by this proposed ordinance and what we're hearing tonight from citizens and what we otherwise have contributed. The fact is that this has been known for quite some time as Phase 4 of the development of the Claremont property site at the NIP. And as a matter of fact, the environmental notification form that was filed with the state in, I believe it was June of last year, something in the order of about 130 pages in length, is quite clear. It identifies all 6 of these structures that were proposed. It was all in the plan at that time. That plan has resulted in a draft environmental impact report referred to tonight by some of the citizens. That 600-page plus report deals with all 6 of these buildings. It is not a separate matter that is before us in the form of this ordinance tonight. The entire development has been under consideration and planning for quite some time. So it's really not a surprise, I think. We have a motion and a second to table. I'm prepared to take a vote on that. All right. If we could have a vote, please, on tabling. All those in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay. By hand, how would
Could we? I would recommend a roll call vote. The vote is to, a yes vote would be to table this measure.
No.
Yes.
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 No.
No.
So the measure is tabled, am I correct? Yes. That's the disposition. Moving on. Proposed ordinance FY 23-009, capital expenditure policy. And I would refer to Councilor Wood for comment.
Close. There we go. Yeah, thank you. So as we experienced tonight, we had a return of fund. This is just an example, but we had a return of funds from the school district, and we expended those funds again immediately to the school district. You know, in the audit world, the use of funds is very tightly tied to projects and that sort of thing. So this capital expenditure policy is simply to clarify that when the town council votes for a capital plan, whether it be with the school district or something else, that money is allocated to the plan as it's been presented and voted on to the council. So therefore, you know, I'm sure it's pretty clear language, but no payment will be made from the town to the school district without an executed purchase order, contract, or receipt for reimbursement. So what that means simply is that, you know, there has to be proof positive that the money has been committed to a project. So you can do a purchase order without actually executing things. You can have purchase orders, and when you execute a purchase order, it's legally binding and you've committed. So the town of Bridgewater could pay the school district for that purchase order, and then they could fulfill the order. Same thing with the contract or a receipt for reimbursement. You know, boiler goes in the building, they fix it, they submit the receipt back, and we've seen that many times. This is to simplify that money, when it crosses from the town to the school district, isn't redirected somehow. We would have to come back and revote or something. So the second piece is payments should be made in accordance with percentage complete method in executing a long-term project. So what this means is if they have a 12-month project and it's under contract, that sort of thing, you know, if they don't need all the money right away, then maybe the percent complete money, maybe 50% up front or 25% executed. That way you don't end up with if you were building a home project and you paid your contractor for a patio and the patio wasn't done, you don't have any recourse for reimbursement. That one, we may want to work out a little bit details when it gets to committee. And then, you know, the final point is really for clean auditing, which is the payments made from the town of Bridgewater to Bridgewater Rainham School District must be used for the specific purpose of the requested funds. And that, again, gets clean relationship between what this body approves and how the monies are actually used. We're not telling the school district how to use the money. They've simply made a request, and we're fulfilling the request. We want to make sure that the monies actually go to. So that's what this expenditure policy.
Thank you, Counselor. I would entertain a motion for referral to the Budget
Mr.
and Finance
President,
and Finance Commission.
we have questions.
I'm sorry.
No, I have a question. So before we vote, I will not be supporting this. What we're establishing here doesn't make a lot of sense to me because within our budget process, the town manager comes to us with capital expenditures, we vote it. I don't know of anyone on this council that's ever asked for progress reports, have asked for any type of documentation. This, to me, is purely, in my opinion, a knee-jerk reaction to an incident or a situation where we were not properly informed of changes by people that were informed within the town. Now, it didn't look good, I'll agree with that, but we have a school committee that we elect, that they are responsible for each town in the district, and what we're doing now, in my opinion, is now we're putting them on notice for things that the voters, including us in this room, vote them to do. And if they come to us with a capital expense and we approve it because we just, in all essence, determine we can afford it, then we entrust the school committee to deliver on it. If they're going to change it, I have never been told that they haven't told us of any changes. We weren't informed when we were told. So I will not be supporting this going to committee, and I will not be supporting this going. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a
Councilor Lindy.
I want to make sure that whatever happens with this, you have good communication with the school. Okay, I served on a school committee for 11 years, and things happen, but I was on we had 9 towns to deal with. I just want to make sure that the school committee isn't left out of the conversation. I don't know who can answer that question.
Well, I can maybe clarify, Mr. Lindy, for you yes. So this really comes back to the running track. So Councilor Moore and I have spent a considerable amount of time over a couple of days trying to nail down what the actual cost of the track. And the track varied in cost throughout the day based on the vendor. And there was no backup given to the expenditure. There was no, it was going to be 6 lanes, not 8 lanes. There wasn't any backup to the request that at one point was about $800,000 to do the running. And so we got emails in the afternoon of what the cost would be from the vendor and then what our share would be. And we voted based on that information. And the money was not expended for the running. That money, there's going to be other money that's used for the running track. So we had people stand up at the microphone to support the running track. We supported the running track. The running track will get built based on other money. There's been money shuffling around for it. But our vote for approval of the running track and that request didn't happen. And so we had a refund of funds and it's expended elsewhere. And so, you know, we did a lot of work in trying to understand what we were voting on for almost $500,000. And I think it's important that when we take a vote like that, it actually gets used for that purpose, or there's additional communication that requires a revote of the expenditure.
Mr. President, whenever, I'd like to comment on that as well.
Councilor Moore?
I think Councilor Gallagher.
Whatever you want. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. I'll be brief because, you know, I think that I certainly 100% agree with Councilor George with one exception, and that is I do think, as I spoke about in the last ordinance about the zoning, I do think there's a process. I do think it needs to go to committee. I am concerned about the language of it. I am concerned about the tone. I am concerned about why. And I will ask all those questions in committee and certainly when it comes back here. But when something is put forward to us, I think we should try to make at least every effort to refer it to committee, let it get it vetted out and come back to us. But I was assured last night at the Budget and Finance Committee that the track and the tennis courts will be built and will be built with other funds. But I don't like the tone and the what I think is the background to that ordinance, but I'll certainly ask those questions in committee.
Thank you, Councilor Moore.
Yeah, I think, you know, my general perspective on this in general is that I think good contracts make good relationships. Having to put a contract in place is not a judgment on trust, not a judgment on what people are doing. It is nothing other than us saying, we've agreed to this, and we are temporary people, and this whole financial situation lives on beyond. Let's make sure it's not. The same reason I pushed for us to have a lease for the schools. Not because somebody is going to do something wrong, it's because these are major investments. And the way that we manage our government is through contracts. And so I think for me, the intention here, you know, if there's a tone implication, it is truly to just make sure that what we are voting on is just clearly communicated to the people that are receiving it. It's clearly communicated to people tracking the. And if there's a change, there's a clear mechanism for that to come back. If it is delayed, we know that. The conversation that's, I think, in this case, I personally found out in open meeting and somebody mentioned, and, we had a lot of discussion about it. So it is no judgment on any person, on any system, or on anything other than the fact we are big enough, managing big enough decisions. It's time to start getting some documents.
Thank you, Counselor. Yes, Counselor
So
George.
I'd like to make a couple comments on that. We have approved multi-million dollar capital requests on estimate, not signed contracts. We're given estimates. This is what the project is going to potentially cost. We've approved it. We've had our town manager go out, contract, and thankfully, we haven't had a budget overrun on any major expense. We do not ask the town manager for anything after the approval other than to deliver on the project that it so chooses. So that's number one on the documentation side. The other side is this. Last night, we were told that the confusion was caused by a timing of when the town was notified that the school committee was going to use different funds for timing purposes in order to get the track done. We were not told during that meeting. Now, my understanding was nothing could be changed in the packet, but we were never informed. And again, this to me is a knee-jerk reaction to that one incident. And for me, if there's anything to be spoken to, I would like to see people on this council go to a school committee meeting, go to their budget and finance meeting, and bring these things up. Instead of trying to put legislation on that fits with us for more control, I think it's bad policy. We just stopped something going to committee. I would recommend we do this as well. I would make a motion to table this.
Thank you. We have a motion to table. Is there a
Second
second?
it for discussion.
All right. And discussion, gentlemen? Counselor Moore.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things to unpack here. So first, I don't know that we should rely on the fact that we don't do it in other places to be justification for not. I would probably flip that and say if there are other areas where there's confusion, we should surface that and address it. I think that's one thing for me. I think the other thing is, I love the idea of going to school committee. I have gone and spoken at school committee. They have spoken here. I think that's a good relationship. I keep coming back to the fact that for years, literally decades, we have these two massive bodies in town that are using each other's buildings, that are sending each other money, that are working to try to support each other. And depending on who's elected and how much history they have, and they know the rules. And again, half a year almost, I asked for the lease up. Schools were lease giving aren't even in the lease. Like, we're just at a point where we, for good relationship purposes, we just need documentation around how this works together. So, if others don't agree, I understand that too, but I think we would benefit.
Just a question is, Councilor Wood?
Yeah, I just don't understand the reaction to table something that when the working process is to send it to committee and have a discussion about it. Maybe the language is wrong. Maybe the tone is wrong. If the rec commission had asked for money to build what's the ball game that's down in the senior center? Pickleball. If they had asked for $200,000 to build pickleball courts and we suddenly see a skateboard park down there, we would certainly have questions. This is really no different than that. The town manager asked money for reconstructing the memorial building. Yeah, I didn't go back and look at the change orders and the costs, but he's bonded against that. And so if he didn't do that, I would have questions. And this is really no different. And so, I would hope that our finance committee are Budget and Finance Committee, and even the school side, we'd get together and talk about the language here and work out some way. So this doesn't stop any project from occurring. It just simply is a matter of timing of a payment to show that the project is committed and underway and get the funds from the town to the them in a reasonable manner. So I'm going to vote against tabling it because I believe in process, and the process is to send it to committee and have a really full discussion on what this means and which way it should.
Thank you for the comment.
I ask for a roll call vote.
Yes, you may.
I have a comment.
Yes, comment. Go right ahead.
So a couple things. So I think we approved part of the funding for a track. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not building a pickle court. You're building a track. Granted, the process to go through it. So this isn't sitting here saying a misappropriation of capital expenditure. I don't particularly understand the lease comment in regards to a capital expenditure policy. I can tell you this, if you want to know about the lease, ask me about it. No one ever has, because I sit on the committee with the lease. I'm more than willing to discuss it. No one's ever asked me that question. So, and I'm not in favor of sending things to committee that I do not support, because the committees have enough to do. And we look at things and we pass them along, but if someone doesn't support something, then they should feel the right to table it if this, in concept, is not something they support. Hence the reason I've put it out there, and that's the reason I'm going to be voting for tabling.
Thank you, Counselor. If there are no further comments, we have before us a motion and a second to table this measure. A request has been made for a roll call vote. I'll ask, please, for that vote to take place now. A yes vote would be a vote to table the measure.
Mr. McKinnon? So it's no. Mr. George?
Yes.
Dr. Perry?
No.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Lindy?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
No.
Mr. Wood?
No.
The yeas are 3. And the
Am I correct? The noes have prevailed?
noes have prevailed with 5.
Motion to move to Budget and Finance Committee.
Is there a second? And a second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? And seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Thank you very much. Order FY 23-045, ratification of renewal cable television license agreement, Comcast Cable Communication Management LLC and the town of Bridgewater. I would defer to Mr. Dutton for comment.
Mr. President, very quickly, this is a contract that's been a very long time in the negotiation process, which has not hindered Comcast's operation in Bridgewater, nor has it adversely impacted users. I can tell you we've negotiated a 10-year renewal, which is a standard term, and the highlight I will give you on the proposed contract, we've secured the maximum amount of franchise fee, number one. Number two, we've negotiated a capital contribution of $230,000. We have added high definition for a local access channel. Comcast will maintain our fiber connection from the Academy building to BTV, as well as obviously from BTV to Comcast. We've negotiated a number of seemingly minor provisions, but which really protect private property owners, require Comcast to return property if they disrupt it in the course of their installations. Also, for those that are only eligible for underground line installations, it provides a slightly less costly installation for customers. Also, customers are guaranteed to receive, or under the contract are guaranteed to receive a credit for any outages that last longer than 24 hours. And we have also implemented through the contract a new permitting requirement that requires a DPW permit for installation or replacement of pedestals on town road layouts. We also happily secured the maximum amount of a senior citizen discount that Comcast offers statewide, and so we're happy with that. Two things I will just throw out, somewhat unrelated to the contract itself, but I think among a lot of things, two things deserve clarity for the folks that are Comcast customers in Bridgewater or anywhere for that matter. Comcast does not have an exclusive franchise. Any other provider can negotiate an agreement with the town. I very often hear complaints like, why isn't Verizon here? They're not here because the short answer is because of the capital expense that they would have to incur to develop a network in town, like a high-speed network. So other companies are always willing to come and negotiate, but they don't because the very high cost of getting into that market. The other piece that I wanted to let people know, as you know, many people are quote-unquote cutting the cord, which means that they're cutting one cord that comes into their house, the cable TV cord. The internet cord, most people are staying with. We don't gain any revenue from Comcast for that internet. So the more people cut the cord, the less revenue we'll see that ultimately supports Bridgewater Television, so our local access. So those are two quick points that I wanted to get out there so that people have an understanding, a better understanding of that.
Thank you. Mr. Dutton.
Question.
I would entertain a motion for
I'll make a motion to approve.
discussion.
And
Thank
and my question is the money for BTV designated specifically for BTV?
It is. It's there'll be no change in the current process.
Good, because the reason I asked that question is other towns have done differently, and it becomes a political football, and it's not a good thing. And BTV is wonderful, has a great relationship with the town, and I just don't want to see anything change. So, thank you.
I would only add that I think my assumption is that you are making a motion to send to budget and finance.
That was going to be my
Yeah,
question.
that's fine.
That is
I'm
correct.
new.
We have a motion
Well-
and a second, do we not?
Yeah.
Very well. We could have, yes, comment, Counselor.
Question through you to the town manager. So just a question on the term of the contract. So 10 years in technology. I wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how we arrived at.
Actually, the 10-year time period is set out by it's either the FCC or the state. It's a standard term. One of you mentioned the technology, the speed of technology changes, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned the cutting the cord concept, because if you talk to certainly folks at BTV, Jeff Fowler off to the side, he may very well tell you that 10 years from now, we may not have, BTV as we know it today. And certainly we may not have that revenue. They may not have that revenue stream. We may not have that revenue stream to support the way it's supported today. So in terms of length of contract, we think this is good because quite frankly, the longer we delayed, the more we were guaranteed a revenue stream over a 10-year period. 10 years from now, we don't know what really will be there.
Yes, Counselor.
Quick question. Mr. Dutton, is there any way to negotiate monies from internet to BTV, or is that just not possible?
There is gobs of money floating around Beacon Hill being paid to lobbyists to lobby one way or the other. It's really a legislative fix, and until we get the legislative fix, we're sort of stuck with the way the system works now. But just because you asked, there has been effort over a number of years. There has been legislation filed that would tap into that internet piece in order to support local PEG access. To date, it hasn't been successful.
And would that contract be updated if that came down from Beacon Hill accordingly?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a motion for referral to the Budget and Finance and Finance. Yes,
Okay.
Councilor Wood.
So I just found section 2.6, the non-exclusivity of the license. But I know in prior discussions that Verizon was not interested in bringing in FiOS. My parents used DSL for their internet. I use Comcast for mine. But in the in some communities down on the Cape, FiOS has come in. I think maybe even portions of Raynham. I'm not sure. How do we attract competition here? Because these cable bills are just outrageous. The internet cost alone is outrageous. How do we get better technology, faster technology, lower cost technology, and find a way outside of paragraph section 2.6 to invite others into?
I think that's a great question. I think the FiOS, very generally, and Councilor Lindy probably knows more about it than I do, but very generally, Verizon spent a lot of money a couple of decades ago installing fiber in a bunch of different towns, and they made a corporate decision quite suddenly to stop the installation of fiber, and they will service those towns that got the installation of fiber with FiOS, and but with rare exception will they continue a build out of fiber to support FiOS in other places that don't have it. So don't quite know why that is. In terms of the players in that market, really it's just FiOS and Comcast, at least in this part of Massachusetts. So that's a great question. I will go back and have some discussions with folks that know more than I do and see what their options.
Thank you. Further comment? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to refer to the Budget and Finance Committees. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I see none. Thank you. We have no further legislation for consideration. We can move to citizen comments. If there are citizens who would care to address the council, please step forward and identify yourself.
About the thing, they do charge a lot. And I just got a box from T-Mobile for half the price. So that's something citizens want to consider. But that's not my, I hope that doesn't cut into my 3 minutes. I want to talk about the environmental impacts and Lake Nippenicket itself. Lake Nippenicket is a very shallow lake, very large surface area, and it is considered middle-age, mesotrophic at this point in time. Now, with climate change and the shallowness of the lake, we could be in trouble. And if we don't look at that parcel of land that is to be developed in phase 4 as being proposed, they want to build on every square inch. There is water coming right through there, a stream, a perennial stream right through the middle. And the buffer zone would prevent them to build all that they want to build that's being proposed. As far as the 55 and older, in the SDEIR, they're for the 55, it's either single units. I mean, they're still reserving the option in that SDEIR to take up even more space if they go with single units for the 55 and older versus a smaller footprint. We're really seeing the impact. When you talk about a canary in a coal mine, our natural resources are that canary. And like I said, I lived there 35 years, and when my kids would bring turtles, and I'd see the little turtles beside their SpaghettiOs, no turtles in the house. I wish I had those coming now because they're gone. In all these years, we've filled up vernal pools, so I don't see the salamanders. And I like to be out in the wild. I've paddled all the way to West Bridgewater. I've walked the Hockomock Swamp. And that ACEC is Area of Critical Environmental Concern. And that encompasses the land that Claremont wants to build out. And I suggest that the next time you meet with Claremont, not be Zoom, but walk the Hockomock Swamp. They do, Mass Audubon will do a tour for you to see how critical it is. In 2010, Bridgewater and the whole of Massachusetts had such flooding that we in Bridgewater here had federal relief funds. It was designated that bad of flooding. And that park serves as flood control for us and 10 other communities. All the communities that it touches, it's a very expansive area. So now if we look at the parcel that's being considered for the 55 and all else, and they interrupt those streams aren't going to stream into Lake Nipanicket. Our infrastructure is already, all the culverts down there are jammed, but the fact if we lose that feed from south to north, then the water won't be going into the Lake Nipanicket, and that water will cool Lake Nipanicket or keep it cooler as we face climate change. So that's very important. But I do want to close quickly and thank you all, particularly Councilor Moore. I really enjoyed your presentation, and it's very practical and logical, and I thank you for it. And thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other citizens for a citizen comment?
I just mainly stayed around to say thank you for considering the concerns of Bridgewater's citizens. I very much appreciate the fact that you all considered what we said and that you voted on it. And I'm 100% relieved that this has been tabled. I also understand, Councilor Gallagher, that Claremont presented to you a community in isolation of the overall project. If they do come back, I would hope that you would ask them or insist upon the entire project being presented to you so you can see the extent of what they're planning. I also recommend if they do come back with this group or an appropriate group within the town, read the Deere report and so that you have the opportunity to really see what we are reading and what we are seeing. But most of all, I just really wanted to say thank you to all of you for considering what we said and for the vote that prevailed tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Other citizens for a citizen comment?
On Austin Street, I would be remiss not thanking you for what I consider one of the best deliberations I've seen in this council since 2011 and before. It's very gratifying to have you engage and actually start to ask questions about various issues instead of basically rubber stamping things. So I'm really proud of you guys for doing that tonight. I will add that to the professional presentation that Mr. Moore gave us tonight. He went to the paper, he went to the document, he provided the data in the document for all of us to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Other citizens for a citizen comment?
Hi, Janet Hanson, Pleasant Street. The last two speakers beat me to it, but I wanted to thank those who voted to table the zoning change. I think it was the right thing to do. There was too much unknown, misinformation, and allowing that, even if it's a small piece, would allow more. It wouldn't give anybody a leg to stand on to oppose anything else. So it's very important that you pay attention to all the details before you even put something forward. So, but I really wanted to thank you guys for tabling it and all your comments and concerns, and I appreciate it. And you don't get thanked enough, and I wanted to thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. You as well.
Be very quick. Melissa Raymond at 317 Lakeside Drive, Bridgewater. I do want to note the fact that these documents, these ENFs, these DEIRs, they are CC'd to the town. So they do end up somewhere here. And I would encourage you to look for them when these big projects do come through, because they are impactful. And I'd like to thank Councilor Moore for a great presentation, and just thank all of you for your really thoughtful consideration of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does this really work? Can you hear?
Yeah.
Sam Baumgarten, Short Street. I still struggle to hear unless you folks sit right close to your microphones, both here and at home. I also wanted to start by thanking Mr. Moore for an excellent presentation. And I think he gave you a lot to think about, and that's exactly what we need. I appreciate your thoughts, Mr. Gallagher, bringing this forward, but clearly there's much, much larger issues here that need to be addressed. And one small zoning, to me, is sort of like letting somebody get in where they don't belong yet. So I hope you will take Mr. Moore's presentation to heart and have some more discussions like you've had tonight. The other thing I wanted to mention is a concern about the funds for the running track. You know, I have spoken in favor of that for more years than you want to count, that we've needed to fix that. Mr. Gallagher sent me an email the other day asking me if I knew anything about the loss of funds for the track. And I didn't know anything about it. I sent a note to Superintendent Powers asking about the progress of the track. And he indicated to me that it was delayed because of design issues. Didn't mention anything about changes in funding. So I'm a little concerned about the fact that I, as a citizen, maybe it's my fault for not reading all the school committee minutes, but I'd like to know, I'm going to find out what happened. Why was money transferred from an account, capital account for a track, used for something else, and now apparently has to be replaced or made up? So I'm very concerned about that. Hopefully the track will get built, but there shouldn't have been any of this moving of money. Thank you.
Thank you. Other citizens for citizen comment? And I see none. We can proceed to council comments, and I would like to begin, if I could, please, with Councilor McKinnon.
Just want to thank everyone who came down today. On that right here, it says Councilor at Large. I represent everyone in town, and talked to plenty of people the past week or two about all this. Maybe 5, 10 people were for it, and over 20, 30 were against it. And maybe the 5 to 10 people were the more influential people who could get me not voted next time. I really don't care. I have a little construction background, run heavy equipment. I've done job sites like this one on 104, and just Mr. Moore's presentation was great, but if we brought up the wetlands map, that alone area, and especially where the proposed 55 building was going, and just really it. Wanted to bring up, I wasn't a fan of that, but the people in the town weren't a fan of it, so that's where my vote went. I hope you guys all have a good day.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor George?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just a couple things to touch on. I was able to attend the Massachusetts Municipal Association annual meeting last weekend, along with Councilor Wood, Councilor Gallagher, Councilor Chase, Councilor Moore. It was a good 2 days. The one thing that I came away with it, a couple things, was I attended one of the seminars on EV vehicles and things of that nature, which I thought was fascinating in regards to communities really, trying to support, push, expand the offerings to obviously support electric vehicles. So that was something I didn't have a lot of experience in, so it was good to sit through that. It was also nice to see the resolution. Hopefully something comes through that came from the MMA, and one of the things that resonated with me was they specifically asked for transportation reimbursement for regional school districts at 100% that we have never gotten. And I know we ask for it every year. Hopefully with the new governor and lieutenant governor, They will both hear that as part of a thing that we always talk about in regards to commitments for people that aren't aware. Back in the day, the state gave incentives for towns to regionalize, and one of them was 100% transportation reimbursement if allocated or appropriated and things of that nature. And as far as I can remember, no town has ever, no regional districts ever received 100%. That's a major, major expense for every school district. So hopefully, amongst the other things that are on there, you know, that was heard. I'm really unhappy in regards to what I perceive as people indirectly accusing a particular group of not being forthright, not being upfront, not being transparent, when in fact they were transparent. They did notify town officials of changes. We had a resident stand up that was told that money was taken away from the track. As far as I know, no money's taken away from the track. The source of the funds to redo the track came from a different place. So this is part of where decades ago we had a really tumultuous relationship with our school district. And a lot of people in this room and a lot of people that aren't here did a lot of hard work in order to bring that back so that we could have a good relationship. And now I'm starting to see the tide turn a little bit, and we're picking things here and we're picking things there. And what I've said from the get-go is we elect school representation like the town represents us. And there are times when I see things trying to be pulled from them. That's their responsibility. And if we don't feel that they're upholding their responsibility, then we go to the voting booth and vote new people in. So I would hope that people take a hard look at these policies, at the things that we communicate, and make sure that we have all the facts straight. Because as we know, you put something out there and it grows like wildfire. And I'm not, and I may be coming across as accusatory, people are lying, which I'm not. But before you start communicating things, let's make sure we get all the facts from all the parties. And then I think we can avoid a lot of the discussion, a lot of the debate, maybe a lot of the frustration. I would really like to see that across the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Perry?
Thank you. First time I haven't been first in quite a while, so. But again, I wanted to thank all the residents that came out here tonight and spoke so passionately about what's going on that way. Again, I think there's more legwork to do. There's more studying. I want to dig into more information about what's going on down there, because I know we'll see more things coming down the road in front of us. So it's certainly not the end all be all, but we all need to be more educated and more prepared to what's going on down that area. But again, thank you for coming out. It's always a fun and interesting meeting when we have a lot of feedback coming in here. So thank you, everyone, coming. And then lastly tonight, I just want to personally extend my condolences to the Wyman family on the recent loss of Diane Wyman. The whole family, obviously, as everyone knows, is a big pillar in the community of Bridgewater, and her loss is profound. She's done a lot of wonderful things in town through sports, through early preschool, certainly through the 55-plus communities that Bridgewater houses. So I just wanted to, again, extend my condolences. I know her services are tomorrow morning, which I cannot attend, but I wanted to let my feelings be known, because she was a wonderful woman. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Moore.
I also wanted to thank everyone for coming out. I think our community is best when we share the things we're passionate about and ask for the things that we want. And everyone did both of those things tonight. So thank you. I did want to just sort of mention, I think one of the comments, was sort of talking about the council maybe not being as connected or maybe not caring or having a different agenda. I think although you see us debate and have different opinions. I guarantee you that everyone on this town council cares about Bridgewater and is trying to make a decision in the best interest of our neighbors. So I just want to make sure that stays just sort of kind of out there. I also wanted to thank the town council for hearing my presentation and welcome feedback and additional information. I think our vote today I think is the start of the conversation, and we do need to make sure that we as a team kind of get together, have a conversation about what do we want of the town, and then what are those things within that goal that we can that we can support as a town council. And so I intend to continue to push that effort. I also attended the MMA convention. I attended the convention on the session on PFAS, and it was interesting. I think I learned that everyone is still learning. That's the reality of it. I think a lot of towns were sort of caught a little bit sort of off guard and are getting sort of mixed information on what it is, what to do about it, where to test for it. And so, kind of without exception, everyone in the meeting was from every town in Massachusetts just trying to learn. And so I think the good news is we have some good connections of other people to share information with. Unfortunately, there isn't like a silver bullet that I could take back, other than communication is key.
All right, thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lindy.
I appreciate all the debate and discussion tonight. I think we had good discussion. I think we had a good presentation to put things in perspective. A lot of things were done tonight, and I thank all the residents for coming here and telling us how they feel, because that's who we represent, after all. I would have joined y'all at the MMA convention if anybody had told me about it. It kind of slipped through the cracks. I like continuing ed. I'm not on the mailing list for MMA yet. I got a forward from, I think, Councilor Moore, but I'm a lifelong learner, and every committee you're on, every body you're on, you learn more every time you're there. It's nice to hear civil debate and discussion. I do feel bad that the one resident that came here basically, for all intents and purposes, told us we didn't care. And we do. We're all here. We're not getting paid. Okay, there's no pay for this, and it costs us time, but it's public service, and that's what it's all about. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I certainly want to thank you, Mr. President, for running a very good meeting tonight. This was a really good meeting. Like has been said, there was a lot of give and take tonight from the council. We all had our own views and opinions. We had a discussion. That's what we're supposed to do. Not all of us agreed on everything. To have 4-3 votes is not a bad thing. But you ran a good meeting. None of us argued with each other. We just voiced our concerns and so forth. And certainly want to thank the citizens that came out to speak on the issue, the main issue that was before us tonight. Those things certainly do resonate with me. I certainly do take them in, as I'm sure my colleagues do as well. I also I wasn't here at the January 10th meeting. I was designated for assignment by the president, actually. I was over in East Bridgewater helping them kick off their 200th anniversary of their town, which is a town I grew up in. But I want to officially welcome Councilor McKinnon, Councilor Lind, and Councilor Robinson, who's not here tonight, to the council. As you can see, this is probably one of the first meetings we've actually had a lot of discussion and different issues and so forth, hopefully. And I'm sure some of these things will come back. I also attended the Mass Municipal Association conference this past weekend. I've attended a few of those over the years, and one of the themes that I certainly heard, and I'm sure my colleagues did as well, one of the themes at the conference through most of the speakers was housing, 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 and how housing is an issue in this state. It's an issue in this country. We heard from Senator Markey talk about billions of dollars that are being earmarked to help communities in Massachusetts with housing issues. We heard from Governor Healy talk about monies that she's putting forth to help communities with housing issues. So I know we're doing our part with housing in Bridgewater. And there may be some pressure on us to do more. Maybe not out on 104, but certainly in other parts of the town, as we have an approved project that hasn't gotten underway on Broad Street. And we have, I believe, a project still in the mill work down at the Perkins Foundry land that should come forward. So maybe some of the grant monies may help those projects or whatnot. I also just want to bring up a subject that has been near and dear to a lot of people in Bridgewater. I'm not going to get into electric bills tonight, but I do want to talk about trash because there's been a lot of discussion about the fees that people are being charged for their quarterly bill for trash pickup in Bridgewater. And I'll give you full disclosure tonight. This letter that I got was from Wind Waste Management, and I have absolutely no affiliation with Wind Waste Innovations. I don't use them. I use the transfer station, and I still think that's the best bang for the buck for the people in Bridgewater, is to use the transfer station. But they did want to reassure, they sent me a letter reassuring the citizens of Bridgewater that the main thrust of the increases is fuel costs, manpower, and so forth, and that they welcome citizens that are concerned about their bills to contact them. They pride themselves on their customer service and getting back to their customers with their concerns. So I would continue all to do that. And I do want to point out, when we have an annual townwide cleanup, Wind Waste Management is there for the town by providing the haul away of all the trash that is picked up, the bags, the gloves, and everything for the town. So they are a partnership in this community, and we understand that not only is trash pickup going up for the communities in the community, but so is electric bill and the cable bill too. But we'll all have to deal with that. But that's all I have for tonight. Thank you all for a good meeting.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Wood.
Thanks. I too attended the MMA session, and my colleagues have talked about a number of topics. I went to a session on private roads and the legal issues surrounding private roads. Over the course of when I was a district representative, a lot of my constituents would call because they lived on a private road, and maybe there was an elderly person on the road, on the private road, and they were asking, could the town plow because the ambulance needs to get through. And some towns make accommodation for that, and some towns do that. So that was the subject matter of the session, but it quickly evolved into something completely different, which was Chapter 90 money, which is our road money. And the two people leading the discussion were both DPW folks in their communities. And one statistic I found fascinating was that if you accept a cul-de-sac, as an example, and one of the gentlemen was from Franklin, which has over 400 cul-de-sacs. When you accept a cul-de-sac that is in perfect condition, you will never receive enough Chapter 90 money from the state to be able to repave that road within 60 years. The Chapter 90 money extends well beyond 60 years. So we know from just driving around town that roads that are now only 10, 15 years old are really falling apart fast. And so their message was that really there needs to be a pickup to support infrastructure, just simply our roads. So it evolved from the private road discussion into this road discussion. And one of the resolutions that the MMA put forward to, which is going up to the state, is to request to increase the Chapter 90 money from $200 million to $300 million. There was a healthy discussion about making an amendment to modify that to $400 million, and the panel indicated that they had done some negotiation ahead of time with the state, and there will be an improvement, hopefully from $200 million to $300 million. But I just found it fascinating that there isn't enough money there to repave a new road that basically starts brand new ever from Chapter 90 money, which means that we're going to be reaching into our pocket to support roads that we use. The meeting was excellent tonight. I'm always in favor of letting something go to committee so it can be hashed out. I've been to many planning board meetings now where there is a lot of discussion on the subject matter. The Broad Street project, before it was approved, was in planning board for, I think it was 7 months, with various hearings extended and a lot of discussion. So I think the process of sending it to committee is healthy, even if I don't agree with the subject matter. I will always support sending something to committee. I learned early on in my experience here on the council that when we go through the budget process, we only control 40% of it. 60% of it's going to go to the school district, and I have absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. I've looked at the detailed listings of what they need to do. I've looked at the mandates of what they need to do. The school committee drives how the school district works. They decide how the allocations work. They negotiate all the contracts. I have no issue whatsoever with that, except that my knowledge is that when we go through our large budget process of, what are we up to now, $70 million or something like that, that 60% of that's going to head out to someplace I have no control of. I don't control any of the contracts there or whatever. So a couple of months ago, I received an email from a school committee member, and it says, quote, "As you know, when the town approves our budget, you do not inform us where the funds come from, and nor is it the council's authority to mandate where it is spent," end quote. So, part of the item that was on the agenda today is related to this, because this is the only place where we get to see a capital plan, 5-year capital plan from the school district. They get to make a request related to that capital plan. We provide cash for it, and the expectation from myself, maybe not from everybody, is that the money that we send will be used for that capital request. And that's the purpose behind that. And I'm glad it's gone to committee. We'll talk about it a lot more because I think the committees are where most of the work is done anyway. And we'll figure out what needs to be changed, modified, or maybe if it's a bad idea. Maybe it is a bad idea, and it gets dropped in the end. But I appreciate it going to committee, and we'll have a good discussion. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I would certainly like to extend a thank you to everyone who came forward tonight, some of whom have already left for the evening. But it's very seldom that the council has an opportunity to host roughly 30 citizens in our presence and to listen to all of their concerns and comments. And I would certainly welcome that to take place more often. Maybe not always 30 persons, but as you know, I think we depend upon the input from citizens such as you provided tonight. And I think everyone spoke very intelligently, and certainly we felt the very deep concern that many people have been feeling. With respect to the Mass Municipal Association conference in Boston, the councilors who have spoken about it tonight, I attended with them, and as Councilor Gallagher indicated, that he and I, in fact, attended the housing session, and you can be sure that housing is going to remain a very hot topic, increasingly so. It's going to be something that you'll be hearing much more about in this town and in many other towns in relatively short order. So to road maintenance, we'll have a measure coming before us, some important road reconstruction work that will be necessary here in town. I think that'll be happening fairly soon. So I thank you for all of that. Just with respect to the vote to table the proposed ordinance, I would like to just remind the councilors that since what we were tabling was a zoning ordinance, we were actually giving some consideration to the proponent, because had the same number of persons who voted to table that ordinance instead voted against the ordinance, it might be 2 years before that zoning ordinance would be able to be presented before us once again. So it actually was, I think, the appropriate action to take. And I think that there'll certainly be more to be heard about it, but it's giving us all an opportunity to give very serious consideration to the ramifications of that proposal. So with that, I have no further comments, and I would welcome a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Have a great evening.